right, so as we're getting ready, give folks another minute or two to kind of roll in. I'm going to talk a little bit about this evening before we get things rolling. We're going to start out, I'm going to talk a little bit, maybe for 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to do a video that's hopefully going to be helpful in kind of setting the mood in terms of the discussions that we want to have tonight. And then after that, I'm going to talk a little bit about where I think things currently stand in our community and talk about a model that might help us kind of understand it a little bit before we move into a work session. I expect all that to probably take about 20 minutes. The work session is for us to have some pretty good discussions and try to figure out hopefully some solutions together to the things that I'm going to identify in the presentation. And I am not going to apologize to you because some of the things that I have to say tonight are going to be very strong. And I think that's going to be important for people to be able to hear. In no way, shape, or form do I lay blame on any group, political party, religion, any other issue that typically generates controversy. Tonight, at least the first part of it, is about finding for ways for people of all different beliefs and ideologies and thoughts, wherever they stand on different sides of issues of controversy, to be able to talk effectively with one another. Now, the promise I will make to folks, because I know that folks do want to talk about some of the more sensitive issues around the schools, is I will hang out as long as I possibly can after we do this work together for anybody that just wants to sit around, shoot the breeze, talk on any subject that folks want to talk about. Okay? And usually I'll hang out as long as I can. Usually that's until people's questions kind of peter out. So, without further ado, I do want to start simply by saying welcome, and that I appreciate folks finding the time to gather together with me this evening. I set up tonight as a starting point for discussions with the community that will be ongoing throughout next year. We are at a pivotal moment, not just in the OSSD, but across the world. And the issues that have created this moment are impacting everything we do, and not for the better. Because of the divisiveness, because of the hate, because of the self-interest that exists outside of our schools, we are unable to do our work with students in our schools. Schools are merely a reflection of their communities. If there are climate issues in the OSSD, it's because those issues exist in Braintree, Brookfield, and Randolph. Right now, our schools can't move forward despite marshaling significant resources to combat the behaviors we see that get in the way of learning. We brought in mental health staff, we've increased counseling services, we've hired behavioral interventionists, we've provided training to the faculty, and we've created student programming that should have mitigated our climate issues, yet they remain. At last month's board meeting, it all became very clear. Every day, all these people in the district go to work putting out the fires of hate in our students' hearts. And every afternoon, they go out into our communities in the greater world only to have those fires relit. To be clear, it is not all students. It is not even most students. But it is enough to have a significant impact on our schools and what we're able to accomplish as educators. And it's not just Randolph, Braintree, and Brookfield. It's all communities everywhere right now. As a person who cares deeply about our district and what we can accomplish, we need to do better, to be better, which is why I've asked you here tonight, so that we can find a way to be more than what we are. I'd like to spend 7 minutes watching a video that I hope is inspirational. And I actually played this for the faculty at the start of the school year as a remembrance to 9/11, but it has many parallels to what we will discuss tonight. 9/11 too was caused by hate. That hate prevented the country from moving forward, and that hate still impacts us today, even though most people don't experience it directly. Further, there was just as much political unrest as there is now, because, let's be honest, that never really changes. And folks then, like now, were fearful and didn't know what or who to believe. For months, people were locked down, not allowed to gather in crowds, and they looked to a confused and unprepared government to help, just like now. With every crisis, no matter how bad it gets, there is almost always a singular event that points to a more positive future. An event that changes the tone and tenor of the country, and which brings us together and makes us finally realize that underneath all the superficial self-serving dissonance and nonsense, that there really are some things worth fighting for that we can all agree upon. In those instances, we are able to move away from hate and fear towards something better. For 9/11, that singular event happened on February 3rd, 2002. For 5 months, folks were afraid to gather, and on this particular day, the first major public event occurred, and it was televised. On that evening, with armed soldiers in the parking lot, with a country fearful that it would draw another attack, the 36th Super Bowl was played. During the first half, you could feel the tension and the fear. At halftime, a well-known band played and the miracle happened. Something about that performance broke the tension and allowed people to let go of the fear. In that one moment, that singular event, the stress, at least for a little while, evaporated and was gone. The world was still a mess, but the needle moved that night from fear and hate to hope. I ask you to take a moment, take a deep breath, let it go, and try to clear all thoughts from your mind in order to experience this 7-minute performance on an emotional level.
The thundercloud passes rain, so let it rain, let it rain on me. Show forth thy praise. Yes. America!
To have a constructive conversation, which we'll have in a few minutes, it's important to understand where we currently stand and why. In the past year, we've seen the number of harassment cases explode. In my time here, we've seen a parent roll down their window and scream at a transgender child who was waiting for the bus. We've seen athletes and spectators throw racial slurs during high school games, our games. It's gotten so bad across the state that the athletic organization requires a statement to be read before every competition that speaks in part. If behavior or hate speech of this kind is observed or reported, the site officials will stop the event immediately. Consequences could include immediate ejection from the event, ending the event, forfeiture of the event, resuming the game without fans, scheduling future games without fans, etc. We've seen the BLM flag, which is a source of contention for some, stolen, and not merely vandalized, thrown away, or hidden, but taken to a bonfire and burned. I want you to visualize that image and what it evokes. I watched less than a month ago as LGBTQ students expressed some of what they've experienced in terms of harassment and bullying, and the response from some of the adults in the room was to laugh and make comments under their breath. I won't even touch what's been posted on social media by students and parents. I saw a teacher of color driven from our district because of hate that culminated with a parent who literally showed up at the school to perpetrate violence on the teacher. During the investigation into what happened, a middle grade student said, "I'm glad so-and-so is our president because we can now take people like that out and shoot them." And the list goes on. In case you missed it, the common theme in the examples I've given is that all but one involved the behavior of adults in our community. That behavior has trickled down to some of our students. Because of this, I have students that are fearful in school and adults who have expressed their fear over what they've experienced in our communities. That fear is real, And as district leaders, we've been spending more and more of our time trying to heal those that have been damaged by hate or investigating and responding to those that are perpetrating hate. This wave of behavior has accelerated, and we need to respond, but the mechanism causing it is complex and not directly within our control, and it's getting in the way of our schools and their ability to focus on student learning. Take a minute, please, and take a look at the diagram up here, because this is the model that we're going to use for our discussion tonight. To understand why things are this way, we need to frame the problem so that we can dissect it, understand it, and hopefully respond effectively to it. Most of us have had enough psychology to recognize that when folks are filled with strong emotions like hate and fear, they are unable to think rationally. The stronger the emotion, the less rational we become. This diagram can be used to describe the rational state of a person or group of people depending upon the strength of their emotions. It is set up to show what happens when groups of people share very strong but different beliefs. On the left you have beliefs on one extreme, and on the right you have beliefs on the other extreme. They can be political, religious, ethical, moral, or based on any issue of controversy. If you're in the dead center on the chart, you are neutral. Your emotional state is calm, and you are at your most rational. As you progress towards either extreme, your emotional state becomes more agitated and your ability to reason declines. The green part of the spectrum is where folks can be rational. They might be a little agitated, but they can carry on a respectful conversation with others with opposing views. In this range, their emotions don't detract from the conversation. They instead add conviction to their statements. You keep folks in this range at holiday dinners by agreeing not to talk about politics and religion. The yellow part of the spectrum happens when the emotional conflict caused by discussing opposing beliefs pushes folks to fear or anger. It typically happens when one side feels disrespected, unheard, or overpowered by the other. The key point is that it's reversible. You can take a walk, take a few deep breaths, or a break from the conversation, and you're back in the green zone. The red zone is the danger zone, and it's where a number of folks in our community currently sit on both sides of many topics. Being in the red zone means that they are completely unable to respond rationally to the opposing side. Any mention of the opposing view causes immediate anger or fear, which is what we typically see play out on social media. Because they are unable to discuss these views without becoming immediately angry, they are unable to resolve the conflict. Because resolving conflict requires a rational mind and the ability to communicate. This is an incredibly volatile state, and it builds up over time because the tension it causes is constant. It can't be relieved through communication, so it has to be relieved through action. What typical actions are seen when folks in the red zone try to resolve conflict? Social media postings, protests, marches, riots, angry folks behaving badly at public meetings, attacks on the government, mass shootings, people acting on hate in our schools and communities, and the most important piece is thinking that it's justified. Students in our schools mistreating one another. People in the red zone don't think rationally, so their actions are about getting back at the other side as opposed to doing what's right. They will literally harm and compromise themselves if it means getting back at the other side. The red zone goal is fight or flight at any cost, and the concept of right and wrong doesn't guide the actions that follow. Our problem right now is that we have too many people in the red zone, both locally and nationally, and their actions, driven by the need to resolve the constant tension they feel, are harmful. Many of our students are subjected to this tension within their homes and families, so it's no wonder we're seeing an explosion of harassment and bullying. They're learning it from the adults in their lives through their actions, their words, their postings on social media, and it's spilling over into our schools. So, with all of you here tonight, this is our challenge. How do we move pockets of people from the red zone to the yellow or green? How do we stop pushing people from the green and yellow into the red? This is the discussion we're about to have here tonight. We're not looking back. We're not griping about the past or what we're upset about or our beliefs. All that does is push people into the red zone. We're here to generate ideas that will help us move forward in a way that will de-escalate our community and our schools, to make the world a greener place, as it were. So, this is our work session. What are your ideas? And I'm going to ask to have a portable microphone up here that people that want to talk and speak. Just announce who you are. I'd be happy to bring the microphone to you. Hopefully we don't get feedback.
Hi everyone, can you all hear me? I'm Felicia Allard. I am a taxpayer, a parent, and also an administrator in one of our buildings at RTCC. And I think one of the things that I see, having been here for a couple years as an administrator, is really we don't have that collaborative attitude where we are working together. I think families and schools need to go back to that, if that has gotten lost somewhere. So I know that COVID meant that people couldn't come into our schools, but that connection, that understanding of what's happening in our buildings is really important. So I think we need to do more collaboration with families.
And as people are speaking, we do have a couple of note takers that are taking notes as we generate some ideas. Thank you. This evening's about you. I'm going to grab her, and you need to make sure you put your hand back up when she's done. So I don't miss you.
I don't mind if people put their heads down because I can't see very well, so I often close my eyes when people think I'm not paying attention. My name is Sarah Crosby. I am a taxpayer and the parent of 2 adult children who graduated from Randolph quite some time ago, longer than I'd like to admit. And I also worked in mental health with kids and a lot of trauma work for years. And I was thinking, I looked at the video of the April school board meeting, which I didn't attend, and I didn't know any of this stuff had been going on because I'm kind of a hermit. And I've been thinking about fear, which you mentioned, anger and fear. But I think that fear is probably the most destructive thing that happens in some of these divisions. Whether it's fear of being humiliated because you feel like people are calling you racist, or fear of being humiliated because people are making slurs about you. And when we are talking about adult behavior, it's incomprehensible to me when I hear about, a parent screaming obscenities at or whatever it was, at people because of their gender identity. And I think one of the things that happens when you're a kid is you come to school, and I don't know about other people, I was a really good student, but I was always a little afraid at school because I was afraid I wouldn't fit in. I heard the governor of Florida say there are no feelings in math, and I got to tell you, I had lots of feelings in math because it was the one subject I wasn't good at. So I always felt humiliated, and I always felt frustrated, and yeah, we're all feelings all the time. So I guess what I sort of want to boil down to is, how do we move out of fear? How do we move out of an environment where people are subject to judgment all the time, and where people are subject to punitive actions? When you read this statement about the athletics, I totally agree that if that happens, you shut down the game, or you take those kinds of actions. But I found that when I was working with kids in a lot of school systems, including this one, often there would be a fight, and the emphasis was, okay, who's supposed to get punished the most? Who started it? Who said the worst thing? Often the bullies were really, really good at not getting caught until the victim exploded and the victim would get punished. And I wonder about what can we do systemically to change that. I've read about a culture known as a primitive culture by our thinking, where when someone does wrong, the entire village gets together and everybody talks about what they like most about that person. When has that person done right? When has that person helped them? do we need to think about something that creates more that kind of atmosphere in our schools? So that we are diffusing the fear of being judged, the fear of being called names, as well as requiring each of us to see both the good and the bad in each other. I guess, I don't know if that's my thinking about fear.
No, I laid a pretty steep demand on folks, so it's going to take a little processing.
My name is Shannon. I'm a mom of a 7th grader, taxpayer. I've been thinking about this a lot, and maybe ways in which I could have some constructive ideas, ways to make our community feel friendlier, safer. But one thing, there are a couple of things in particular that have to do with the fact that I feel like so many Americans right now are just spread thin, overwhelmed, just trying to make it day to day. And we have school 5 days a week, we have to work 5 days a week, and I feel like something that the public school system could think about doing is starting school later, is having a longer lunch, maybe instead of like a quick half hour, an hour. Another thing I thought of was having a PTA. When I grew up in New Jersey, and there were PTAs where parents were involved in fundraising and decisions that went on in the school. Of course, that would mean that the community would have to put extra time into something, which I'm sure most people in this community don't have the time for. But yeah, I think those are definitely 3 things I thought of and I wanted to share.
No, it's a start. Like I said, we've got some pretty good note takers keeping notes. Up your phone. How do we have these conversations that aren't going to push people towards the red line? Because we got some tough stuff to talk about. Yeah. Maybe I'll come on over to you. Make me get my exercise today, which is good. Doesn't happen enough.
My name is Amy Grasnick. I'm a resident of Randolph. I'm also the director of the Public Library. I'll try holding it closer. Better?
Yep.
So my name is Amy Grasnick. I'm a resident of Randolph, and I'm the director of Kimball Public Library. I have a great belief in empathy being something that people do, not something that people have. And I have experienced a couple of ways of doing empathy. There are models out there which provide safety for people who may be complete strangers to meet somebody for the first time, to have a conversation that is deeply personal, that creates a personal connection and takes them beyond the idea that this person is a stranger to this person is a fellow human being with experiences that may be very different from mine or incredibly similar to mine. And I believe in the power of human connection. I believe that as soon as we understand that the person whose opinion we may not agree with is still fully human, that we can begin to set aside all of our expectations, our stereotypes, all the things that we project onto that person and accept them as a fellow human being, fully valid. These ideas we may not agree with, but that does not invalidate them as a person.
Other folks who would like to speak? pray for who was first? Vicky, did you see?
William, can you put the speaker because we can't hear down there?
Yeah, Todd's here. Make sure that's-
Hi, I'm Chloe Evans. I'm a middle schooler here in 7th grade. And I think a lot of stuff can happen when they just like recently I feel like they've been taking away a lot of our time outside by getting rid of having our break time be inside now and having it be shorter than it was originally. And I feel like just letting students outside is something that can really help because sometimes I feel like kids just need to breathe and they just need to be outside. And a lot of teachers have argued in the past when I brought this up that what they think that I just want more time to just like gossip with my friends or whatever, but really that's not, I mean, even just being able to socialize with people is still something that's very important for kids, especially kids who are, you know, like developing and stuff. And another thing is it's just being outside for me personally, it just feels like a break from all the pressure that comes with school and sort of like I just feel like I'm releasing like all the stuff that just happened in the past classes or whatever happened, and just being able to be outside is something I feel like should be more prioritized in school. Yeah.
Yes, I'm Tim Eberhardt, parent of 2 daughters who went here long ago. I just want to thank you because I think having a forum, a meeting like this where whoever we are, can share and perhaps for future issues or concerns or times like this when we feel so broken and separate or around issues that we can sit down, as you have suggested, and have modeled tonight to talk about it and say, we're all in this together. Thank you.
You're standing in the dark back there, that's why. Even with that bright shirt on.
Good evening, everybody. Some of you guys might know me from high school. I'm a former student of RUHS and RTCC. See a few familiar faces out in the audience, but I'm currently in the Vermont Air National Guard. I've been in for 2 years now. I enlisted while. My name is Ethan Knutson. Sorry about that. But I've been in the Vermont Air National Guard for about 2 years now. I enlisted while I was still in high school, and it has been, you know, a lifelong dream for me to do and fulfill. And while I was at basic training, we were taught and trained in situational awareness. Situational awareness to me is knowing the surrounding, knowing the people that you surround yourself with, and having that inner gut feeling of knowing right from wrong. I've been in situations where I was able to identify right from wrong in the military and in my civilian life as well, even in high school too, with people I was around. So I know I've been around people that have talked badly about people because of their race or gender identity or whatever. And me being a member of the Vermont Air National Guard and the United States Air Force, I cannot allow myself to be part of that because I have brothers and sisters who I serve with in the United States military who are Black, Mexican, Spanish, female, male, whatever. And having, this conversation here today to talk about those ideas about how we can become, more inclusive to these groups and support them as well. But also too, being lenient on it and not making it mandatory or pushing an agenda or an idea on somebody, especially if it puts them in a situation where they may or may not agree with it. Even going back to what is their life at home, especially because these kids, they trust their parents, and parents can easily influence their child's behavior, especially with a growing young mind where they can be easily influenced on anything. And also too, our country and I would say the world is in a very, very, it's in a hard standpoint, I'd say. We currently have the Russian dictatorship invading Ukraine and possibly others. I know that Vermont Air National Guard just sent 8 F-35s over to support the NATO mission to prevent another global conflict. And with the events that happened with the 2020 election and everything, really divided the United States, I'd say, as well. Especially with the pullout of a war that we were in for 20 years in Afghanistan as well, where many, many American lives were lost in Afghanistan. So, and also too, one of my additional roles in the Vermont Air National Guard is I'm a SARC counselor as well, which is for sexual assault and rape, and also too with suicide and depression as well. And definitely with that additional role, it does put a lot of stress on me as the individual who is dealing with these reports, and also to the individual who is telling me about what happened to them or what they're currently dealing with. But then I think again about that basic situational awareness that I was taught in basic training and the emphasis that they put on it, and how, how much it actually does help and how much it really does mean to me as I'm able to keep a clear mind and fulfill my duty to the individual that I'm helping as well. And also too, I take this into my civilian life as well. I'm a HVAC service technician at a company in Williston, and the role that I'm put in with that job is pretty stressful with diagnosing mechanical issues with HVAC systems. And I'm able to take time when I'm at jobs to take a break and do whatever I like to do just to kind of take down that stress level a little bit so that I'm able to fulfill my job and fulfill the role that I'm playing at my company. And that I feel like could be, with basic situational awareness, could be something definitely to be emphasized more at the school as well. I know while I was in school, really, stuff had to be done, and sometimes deadlines were short, whatever. But I think definitely teaching kids how to maintain their stress levels and their day-to-day lives, whether it's going to school, sports, after-school jobs, whatever it may be, definitely teaching these kids how to create schedules and plan ahead and everything like that. So, these kids have a clear mind. And also too, go into some of these questions about how we can keep kids in the green zone and have rational thinking, is to have a mind that isn't under stress or overwhelmed, or a body that is overwhelmed. Because for me, or people, in the United States military, like my grandfather who served in the 94th Infantry Division during World War II, he was put into a lot of stressful positions, especially after the war too, when he came home and there wasn't many support for him, as well as, PTSD really wasn't too recognized. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll give it back to you, Mr. Milliken.
No, actually, when talking about the military, you almost said the most important part. And I was keeping my fingers crossed. When we're in the military, we have to be accepting of everyone, because it's the only way we know that people have our backs. And I can't state more strongly enough how important that is in our communities right now. Yeah, 131st Engineering Group out of Burlington. So, yeah, good to see you. Yeah, you too.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Other folks, comments?
Ethan, I want to thank you. That was wonderful. I wasn't going to speak, but you were an inspiration. I was nervous coming today because I am still nervous. I'm Kim Anderson, and I'm a taxpayer, but I'm not sure what that has to do with the topic. Anyway, thank you for speaking, Ethan. I left the last meeting, and the one thing I wanted to do was to figure out how to set up times to have coffee with everyone that was upset and having a hard time at that meeting. I left because I was actually scared, but I felt worse for the people who were so upset. And I want to just go back to what Amy said. I think that one-on-one conversation is so important. And with the pandemic, we've lost a lot of those conversations. I work in restorative justice, and I see all of your kids a lot, and it's really sad. And then I see your kids as adults, and it's even more sad. And I see the kids who were the victims of the bullies, and they are now the perpetrators. And it is really, really sad. And I don't want that to continue. I only see it getting worse every day. The number of kids that come through restorative justice, or diversion as you might know it, it's awful. And they're getting a better option by coming and seeing us instead of having something on their criminal record. But I'm here because I don't want to see those kids going through the system. And kids that bully and kids that are bullied end up working with me, and often they work with me for their whole lives. And so I'm here because I want to do whatever it takes to bring us together and to have those conversations that we need to have. Because I felt the pain and I felt the anger, and I just felt like we could do better. We are not a community of angry, helpless, fearful people. And I want us to figure out how to address that. Thank you.
Very much.
Hi, I'm Nikki Richardson. I live here in Randolph.
And our kids were all grown up before we moved here, so I've never experienced the school system for my children. However, a couple of years ago, Neil and I were invited to work with the group that was dealing with racial justice. And so we saw firsthand some of the problems the kids were involved in. But we also saw a group of young people who didn't know anything about race, really, other than that they knew a black race existed and there were some black kids in the school. But they didn't know a lot about what people went through. I'm wondering, with all of the good things that have been written, particularly for kids in middle school and high school, if there could be a system of role play. And I think that sometimes when kids read a book and they get involved in a part, particularly if they're going to be the person that's been abused or experienced some hard times because of their race, that maybe through role playing, there's a way for kids to develop a better sense of what somebody else goes through.
My name is Devin Cropley. I'm a father of a Brookfield kindergartner. And one thing that I've noticed bringing up a kindergartner is I think that if we start our kids off with like more community and family-based activities, I think that we can all see that we're all very different, but we share a lot in common. You know, we take her swim lessons, soccer, art class stuff in Randolph. You know, I'm not going to say how my beliefs, but I know I'm sitting across tables with people who think completely different than me. But at that moment, we're all sharing the same common thing, is that we're having fun with our kids. And I think that if we put our kids first, put our beliefs second, that's a good place to start.
Thank you.
My name is Tev Kelman. I teach social studies and English at high school. I didn't catch your name, sir, Mr. Cropley. Devin, yeah. I appreciate what you're saying. I was thinking along the same lines, right? I think one of the things we got to do is have a lot more conversations about our common values and our common principles and our common goals. I think that something that I see happening in this country is people across the political spectrum buying into this idea that who you voted for in November is the defining characteristic of your identity, and I think that's really false. I think it's a false division. It's not to say it's not real, right? It's not to say it's not like there aren't real disagreements and real issues of deep concern. I'm strongly of the opinion that school needs to be a place where we do talk about those things, but I don't think it needs to be the starting point. I don't think it needs to be the ending point, and I don't think that it needs to be the mindset that we approach every situation. Which team is our people on? And so that's kind of what I'm hearing you say, Devin, is that when we can create situations where that's not the starting point, right? It seems like there's a lot more opportunity to move from a place of what we agree on. I think a lot, I'm sure a vast majority of people in this room are either parents or have raised kids, right? And I'm a parent of young children, a little younger than your daughter, and I can very much relate to the feeling of, fear that you put your kid in a building with people you don't know, you don't really know what's going in their heads, right? And I think, it doesn't really matter where you are on the political spectrum. So I think that creating opportunities where we're going to start by articulating common values is really important. I think a couple concrete ideas about how that might happen. I love the idea of a PTA or something like that. I think it's, I've had this thought before too, that, some of the only times that we talk to parents in a sort of organized way often is in a sort of adversarial setting, right? Or a setting that is easy to become adversarial. I think that was true during COVID. I think that can often be true during, negotiations and other things that happen at board meetings. I think another thing that I would love to figure out how to do more, and this is something we talk about all the time at school, is how to get you all into our classrooms more, because I really do feel like, I don't think that folks would be as uncomfortable with some of the stuff that I've heard expressed if you could see how we do it, and the kinds of discussions that are had. Again, that's been super challenging. It's been like impossible because of COVID, and people have work schedules. There's a lot of logistics, but I think like setting an intention that that's something that we want to do more as a community, and to treat you all and your opinions and your experiences as resources, rather than having it be in a threatening frame. One other thing I just want to say, and I'm not trying to I appreciate your framing very much, Lane, and I may be misunderstanding it, but my feeling is that the center of, I think that when there's controversy, when there's polarization, when there's strong opinions on two or more sides, there's often a tendency to want to avoid talking about those things, or censor the opinions or the topics that might bring those out. I think again, like there's a little bit of that, well, you're either Democrat or Republican, and that's the end of it thinking. I think that sometimes there is no center because there's not just two sides, you know what I mean? I think that there's also ways that we could approach some of these difficult topics, but reject the way that it's been framed by politicians, by media people, people who I think, as Lane was referring to, might have a vested interest in ordinary people who are just trying to send their kids to public school, being at each other's throats about stuff, rather than focusing on what do we need as a community to run our schools the best way for our kids. So I think the last thing I'll say is, I suspect that there are some grievances that we all share with the way that things are that are not within the power of anybody in this room or in this district, and that really require all of us working together to look up and look at what solutions we should be asking for from leaders beyond the district, whether that's state, national, or anything in between. So those are just some ideas that I want to throw out.
I'm Richard Howard. I'm a teacher in the district. I'm a parent of a kindergartner and a preschooler in the district. I'm a taxpayer. And I'm an immigrant. And that word is loaded. It's especially loaded in my classroom. And we stumble into these conversations, and I appreciate you mentioning these are hard conversations. We don't seek them out, but they happen. So some of the things that I've heard when it's been mentioned that I'm an immigrant, and some of my students have never really taken that into account. Why aren't you Mexican? Wait, you're not a criminal, are you? And I have to explain every time that an immigrant is simply someone who's moved from one country to another. I have a picture on my classroom wall of a former class I taught in London, a whole rainbow of races and nationalities. We used to joke there was only one English person in that class, and only half of it was me. But again, I had to explain to my class that many of them were immigrants. Who's that? Well, that's Yusuf. He barely survived a trip across the Mediterranean. So assumptions, I think, are what really drive a lot of the misunderstanding. I deal with a lot of those assumptions most days if people meet me for the first time. There are definitely some assumptions, but that's okay, I can deal with those. I'm sure many of you assumed that when I picked up this microphone that this was not the accent you were going to hear. And that's really where I like to start with my students, and I'd like everyone to start really is, if someone makes an assumption, rather than attacking it, is to go after it with curiosity, and to really understand why someone got to that place. With the students in my class, it's really understandable. Most of them were born here, were raised here, have not bumped into anyone from another country besides myself. So I like to ask them how they got to that opinion, and then encourage them to seek opportunities to find people who are different, find opinions that are different, and then work from there. And like a couple of you have already said, that we have more in common than we realize. So that's really what I would advocate for, is going in with curiosity and losing assumptions.
Hi, I'm Mimi, and I have a kid in the high school here. I want to jump on the backs of a few people who have spoken before. Lane, what did you say about the military? Like, we're all in this together. Paraphrasing. I remember when my son was in elementary school doing soccer and whatnot, there was a lot of opportunities for parents and the community to get together and working together. Because in soccer practice at the field, you had Brookfield, Braintree, and Randolph in the same spot. And you had parents that were picking up soccer balls and putting up coaching and whatnot. And we had the whole community working together. And it didn't really matter, again, what anyone's beliefs are. You had one thing in common, that as your kids grow up, and especially when they're in high school and they're more self-sufficient, and they're taking themselves to games and they're doing things on their own, we kind of lose that community connection. And it would be nice to have maybe more, because this is a union school, opportunities where we can maybe work together to volunteer on making improvements to the school grounds together. Gardening or fixing things. I'm sure there's a lot of things like that light over there that needs to be fixed. We don't have the people to do it.
It's true.
We have, in Randolph, Brookfield, and Braintree, we have a wealth of extreme talent in all facets. Whether it's like mediating, whether it's construction, landscaping. And if we could come up with projects that would include parents and sometimes also include the students too, just that one step of working together on something, and maybe make it like a monthly thing, monthly things and seasonal things, gives us more opportunity to grow and to learn about each other, which was nice about like the little kids playing soccer. It was like every Saturday, and you got to know parents, especially shy people. Eventually got out of their shell and talked to other parents. So those are my concrete thoughts of how we can move pockets of people from those different colored zones.
Let's try to do two more. I thought I saw. Don't move. Yep.
Hi, my name is Casey. I'm a parent and an alumni and a taxpayer. And some of these issues were brought to my attention last week. My son goes to the vocational center, and he watched a board meeting. And it was really interesting. And your question is, how do you stop pushing people from the green, or pushing people into the green? And I think that you have to remember to start with yourself. People were showing up at that meeting very angry, to the point where the woman down at the front left because she was scared. We can't do that for our kids, because they're going to feed on that energy and bring it back to the school, and that's not okay. So I think all of these ideas are great and wonderful, but I really think you need to start with ourselves. And before you come to these meetings, check yourself, make sure you're in the green and not in the red, and start from there, because we can't do anything if we all show up here angry and scaring people.
One more. What I'll do is, there were two hands up, so I'll do one, two.
Hi, I'm Colin Duplo, and I live in Brookfield, and I have two young kids, one in the school system, one about to be in the school system. And I guess this is more of a comment that I love this place. And I think probably just that everyone here is here because they also love this place. And probably a lot of what's happening, the tension comes out of fear of change. And I fear the change of the civil discourse that is a really strong tradition here. It's what town meeting is based on, and it's what makes this place incredibly special. It doesn't exist in, I don't think, the whole rest of the country. And I guess I'm here because that's the most important thing to me. And I want this place to keep that. And I just hope that everyone feels the same and can keep that in mind.
Hi, my name is Tina. I am a junior in high school exchange, and I am an exchange student from Latvia. My home is 8-hour drive from Ukraine. And I do speak with an accent. I have different cultural perspectives sometimes. And I also have gotten, let's say not hate, but I have gotten some mean comments about that here in the high school. And most of them have been really uneducated. Like, oh yeah, we're having a Cold War with you. And they are meaning the Soviet Union 30 years ago. Or stuff like that. And that just shows me that there is education to be done. And when the war broke out in Ukraine, I did a presentation here in school, and a lot of my classmates and my peers, before that, they were talking that the worst thing that's happening is gas prices are going up. And after we had this long conversation, I gave them a long presentation, and they could ask questions, and they did. And I think they weren't scared to ask the wrong question. They weren't scared to be wrong. After that, I didn't hear from my peers a single complaint about that gas prices are too high. I just heard how we need to support Ukraine and how bad the things are that are happening there. And that proved me another time that education is the key to solving these kinds of things. And I am so thankful for our racial justice class here in high school, that we don't just talk about racial issues, we talk about any issue that we want to bring up. But I don't think that having around 20-ish people class 4 times a week is enough. And that's definitely not enough people in the class. It's like, I don't know, like 1/10 of the high school. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Conversations with folks, so that will continue. This is the first of many. In the fall, if I can arrange it, I'm starting to reach out now to have Calvin Terrell come back. Some folks may or may not remember prior to COVID, Calvin is a nationally recognized speaker. He is often called up when there have been exceptionally large incidents of violence in cities in and around the United States, and he goes in there and he works with the groups on either side to try to calm things down. And one of the things that I would like to do with Calvin, something that we did in Marblehead many, many years ago, is because I think a lot of the people in the community don't actually recognize how much is really going on with things. There's tons of good stuff and there's some not so good stuff. And I think one of the things that he could bring, and he's an exceptional facilitator, is to do a little fishbowl exercise. Have a panel of students and community members up on stage who actually talk about the things that they've experienced. Because one of the things that does not push people to the red is getting connected empathically to other people's emotions. And to be able to hear those stories is something that can connect with everybody. And I think that's going to be kind of an important step in moving forward. So I do thank folks tonight. I am going to hang out. I promise that because we talked about some pretty general issues in terms of the conversation here together with folks, and I'm glad that folks were willing to share. But I'm happy as we kind of transition to talk about more sensitive subjects. So folks are welcome to hang out for that. If there are questions and comments that people would like to make, I'm happy to listen and respond. The only ground rules that I'm going to put up for that are these. Right? Being heard does not mean others accept your position, just that you've had a chance to speak your piece. Speaking your piece means doing so in such a way that you can be heard. Expect that if you're asking me questions, that I'm going to be blunt and honest in my responses. So this is your opportunity for a little while, for those that want to hang out and ask me anything that's on your minds. Yeah. It's easier for other folks to hear if they want to be a part of that.
I'm wondering if you could, I had to leave the meeting early, and so the reason I didn't even know about the chicken thing, I got there and that was happening. I went for the Black Lives Matter conversation, and so I'm wondering if you could fill me in on what the decision was about whether the flag will stay raised or what's going to happen with it.
So, talk a little bit about Black Lives Matter. That's still being discussed at the board meeting on May 11th. But to talk a little bit about the Black Lives Matter flag, I'm the one that actually requested the board to create a policy. And there's a very specific reason that I did that. And it has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. It has to do with a Supreme Court case that was actually decided yesterday that was supposed to be decided in June. And I don't know if folks are familiar with what that Supreme Court case was. It was a fight in Boston at the Boston City Hall. Boston City Hall has 3 flagpoles that fly out front. One, they keep the federal flag on, right, the United States flag. The other one, they keep the state flag on. And the third one they've used for many years to fly the symbols and flags of anybody who came along and said, hey, I'd like to put my flag up there. About 2 years ago, a white nationalist Christian organization came along and asked to fly the flag in Boston City. And so it was interesting. What went to the court was a religious matter. You know, was flying Boston made the claim that flying this flag was the government espousing a religion, which is not allowed to do under the Constitution. But the Supreme Court at that time said, you have bigger problems than that. That's not your real problem in making your arguments. The real problem in making your arguments is that the second you allowed a non-governmental flag on that flagpole, you have now created a forum for free speech, and anyone can put up any symbol that they would like. And that's what was decided 9-0 yesterday. So the reason, in anticipation of that Supreme Court case, the reason that I put that in front of the board and said, hey, do you guys mind considering a policy about this, is because we are in a position right now, and again, the blunt conversation with the divisiveness in the country, and with people at both ends of the spectrum, both in the red, where when you're in the red, typically what happens is you're not able to think too well, you're upset, you're agitated, your beliefs have been, you feel your beliefs have been stepped on. The only thing that you're capable of doing is action. If we don't do something, it is highly likely that a group is going to come along and request to put the KKK flag up, just in spite of the fact that the Black Lives Matter flag is flying, or a white nationalist flag, and we are not going to be able to say no. And I do not want that happening in our district. And so that's the state of the Black Lives Matter. That's the rationale behind why it's being brought up now. It has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. If it had been a rainbow flag, the same thing would have happened. Right? The second we flew a flag that was non-governmental, we established that flagpole as a form of free speech and anybody can use it. And we cannot win that fight if we say no. That was made very clear. It's a good question. Yes.
So Lane, as a follow-up, please, can you clarify your position of saying the white nationalist Christian flag? Are you associating it?
I am using the wording from the article that I read.
Okay, so I think there should be a separation of that for clarity and accuracy.
Yeah, I'm stating what I read from the articles that I've read.
Okay.
Yeah.
The headlines are.
Other questions, comments, any topic? Again, these are touchy subjects. Again, I'm going to be as straight up as I can. Okay.
I heard one of the people at the meeting, one of the teachers, talk about how exhausted she is. And I hear this a lot, because I have a lot of friends or acquaintances who are teachers. And not just here, but in other schools as well. And I wonder what we need to do to support teachers, because it sounds like they really are just out there and they're working really hard and they get slammed, and I don't know how to help that, and I don't know enough about what is done here to help that. And I heard the student from the junior high talk about, well, some of the teachers, if I ask, if I want to be outside, they think I just want to hang out with my friends. So teachers are suspicious of kids, but they're suspicious of kids because there's all these behavior stuff. And I did want to ask one of the people at the meeting, that I watched the recording of, what is it, school board meeting, was talking about horrible, like drugs all day and vaping in the bathroom and the doors, there's no doors on the, was that in it? I mean, I know you're not really the person to give everybody's perspective, but how accurate is that?
So you've got a lot of questions involved into one.
Yeah.
Much of what was presented, again, that comes from red zone thinking, so I don't blame the people that said that. Red zone thinking is not about right or wrong. It's about getting a point across. It's about attacking the other side. So those pieces, yeah, there's been fights at school, but are there constant assaults? No. So no, it's a part of that, and again, this is not a criticism of the person who made them. When people are ramped up, yeah. In terms of the teachers, all of us, administrators as well. It's been a hell of a 3 years, and it's settling a little. But the scary part is, because we've thought and we've dealt with this for quite a while, the mechanisms that are causing folks to be exhausted are not within our control. And that's a problem. It's one thing if we can say, here, take an extra week off and that's going to fix it. It's not going to fix it because the mechanisms that are causing people to exhaust are still going to be there when they get back, and they're going to be exhausted again within a week. Some of it's COVID. And some of the teachers that are here are more than happy to speak. But some of it's dealing with this.
Back before COVID too,
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of energy. When your primary goal should be educating students, when you're spending a lot of your time managing behaviors that are based in trauma and all the divisiveness that the students are hearing out and about that they're bringing into the schools. There's a lot of it. And it's been a tough time. Plus, just the actual stress. Remember, teaching is a very different profession than most, in that during COVID, when the place you didn't want to be was in a congregate setting with people, if you're a teacher, where are you? You're in a congregate setting with 20 kids standing around you in close proximity. And a lot of them, especially during last year, it wasn't even an issue because of the vaccine. The kids couldn't be vaccinated until May. So just that stress and that fear can take its toll over time as well. So it's, I don't have an answer for it. I do think about it a lot. I've thought about it for a long time, but like I said, the mechanisms that have caused it aren't within our control. Until those clear up, there's not a solution. But if people have ideas, I'm open.
And I have a question.
Sure.
So are you taking what I thought was a second option off of the table, or is the board taking it where it would be a student-led policy to do all the work that needs to be done to get flags flown on that pole?
So I'm not, neither is taking it off the table. They can have the discussion, but in talking with the legal team, the problem with the weaker version, which is, yes, we'll put a process in place so people can put flag up, it still ends with the same problem. The second the flag goes up, if it's non-governmental, whatever process we use, we then can't say no to other people. We can have a policy that says that, but if it goes to court, we won't win.
But it's not even about whatever flag it is. If the policy goes through the same policy of having it a student initiative, going to the community, working with the community around that flag, doing community work, also doing work with the faculty and staff, and then doing work with your peers as students inside of the school, and all of that work happens and it goes through the board then.
It doesn't matter. The second that flag goes on the flagpole, it's non-governmental. That flagpole is now an open forum for free speech. And anyone else who comes along, we can make them hop through the process, but once that flag is up there, they can make the claim that you're discriminating against my free speech rights, and they're going to be right.
But is it wrong to have many flags as long as they're not towards hate? They don't represent hate?
But we can't prevent the flags from hate being up there if any flag is up there. That's the problem. That's the problem.
I think we could, but I guess it would be a different.
I've talked with the legal team, and one of the things that I am charged with is preventing liability within the district and protecting the district's image. Yeah.
This is kind of a nerdy civics teacher follow-up question, but the Supreme Court case, I had not heard about the Supreme Court case you referenced. The Supreme Court case that I'm aware of regulating free speech in school is a Vietnam era one called Tinker versus Des Moines, which I believe held that schools, given their educational mission, actually have greater leeway to regulate speech that is seen as disruptive to the mission. I'm just curious.
Disruptive to the operations or profane.
Right. So I guess my question was,
the new Supreme
is
Court
the new case is taking that into account and overruling that, or?
Yeah, 9-0 is pretty clear.
Yeah, I didn't read the opinion, so I wasn't sure how it intersected with that one.
Yeah.
It sounds like that.
Yeah.
Somebody's thought of that. Okay.
Yeah, no, there's been a significant amount of thought. We knew 4 years ago that this was potentially a problem. One of the reasons we could be a little bit more lax about it, again, the honesty, we knew it could be a problem, but people didn't know about it. Now that that Supreme Court case is out there, everyone knows about it. We're living in a time of divisiveness where people are actively looking for ways to damage that beyond flag. And so it's much more likely that we're going to have somebody approach us and try to put something down.
If I could just ask, this is not a question I expect you to answer, but maybe
Yep.
to kind of, it's not a rhetorical question either, but it's a question of the community, which is, if it's not possible to affirm the humanity and right to feel safe and valued at school of some of our most vulnerable and targeted students in that way, and I can't debate.
So now we're pushing things towards red.
No, I think the question is, how do we support those students? Right, give them what we need.
They, like every other student, they have free speech rights. They're free. They want to wear them. So before you interrupt me, let me finish. They have free speech rights. What does that mean? If they want to wear a Black Lives Matter T-shirt or a hat to school, they most certainly can do that. Just like it's okay to wear a MAGA hat to school or a I Love Joe Biden T-shirt. They can still do those things. That's free speech.
I guess my question is not to push back on the policy, but rather to recognize that we have a serious problem of students of color, students from the LGBT community, as well as I would add students who are disabled, students who have grown up in generational poverty.
So
Not feeling safe in school. And so my question is just simply like, how do we as a community, what do we do proactively to show those kids that they matter? And if the flag is not the way, I just like us to have I just want to pose that question. Like I said, I'm not expecting an answer. I'm not trying to be provocative by asking it.
No, but part of the reason we're meeting here tonight is to try to start that process. There's an equity coordinator. That was one of the reasons that we have an assistant superintendent who's coming on board next year. As part of the responsibility is equity coordination to help work with folks to figure those things out. So yeah, they're very good questions. Go ahead.
Can I just ask whether there's going to be a decision on May 11th? Because I do have strong feelings on this topic, I'll admit. I hope I'm not in the red. But I do.
No, I meant depending upon how things are phrased, we can be pushing other members here into the red.
I just want to ensure that a decision isn't made that further affirms the systemic problems that we have. So it like having a policy that's afraid of a lawsuit further just makes the systemic issues worse. I'd hope that we can be creative in a way to push that a little bit to right the system while supporting students who need the support and expressing support.
And that's why we need the equity coordinator. The board did its due diligence along with me. This has actually been part of the last 4 board meetings. So there has been significant discussion. They brought the lawyers in twice to talk with them to get the information they need to make the most important decision about what's best. So yeah, I do appreciate that. But yeah, that equity coordination piece is key. It's something that we've been missing. There's been pockets of really good work that folks have been doing, Dana and Emily especially. But we really need that coordination so it becomes a K-12 district focus and getting everybody involved and talking about this. Because that plays in with a lot of the themes that we heard tonight about the importance of just getting people together, right? And trying to get us all on the same page. So very good.
I understand what you're saying that we all have free speech, but wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt isn't enough. It's not enough to just state your opinion on it. I feel like the school can also be doing a lot of other things. Like, if the flag comes down, I think that we should be putting up more posters or other forms of things on the walls, like further proving or like showing that this is a safe space for everyone. And I also think that a good idea would be to just get everyone in the school together and just really like maybe have some speakers of color who have gone through these things and have them share their experiences and have them share how this made them feel. And then maybe really show like the history of why people who are not Black saying the N-word isn't okay. Like showing why, because I think a lot of the people who say racial slurs like that, they just don't understand why it's not okay. They don't know any of the history, and I think that really showing it would be very helpful, and also showing off everyone's experiences would be a good help as well.
No, it's awesome. I was looking over because I was making sure that our wonderful note takers are taking that interest. But that is one of the reasons also to have Calvin come back. You were too young to remember the last time that he was here. Absolutely fabulous getting me to help us get this work going and to connect in the director. And you're an awesome person too, and you're going to be here for a number of years. You're doing a great job. So I invite you to be a part of that group. It's good. Actually, both key hold chairs, there was one over here that the first said.
The Supreme Court ruling about free speech, I believe, may also apply to non-school groups who want to use the facilities. If you allow a group to use the facility in any way, you need to provide all people and all groups to use the facility within, as long as they don't tear it up. That's it.
That's one that we want to check because in the old days, there was really only one group that, I don't know if anybody knows this, there's only one group that schools were allowed to prevent using the facilities. Boy Scouts. So for many, many years, the Boy Scouts were the one group that could not, that schools could prevent from using their facilities because they change.
Years ago, as a church, we would use churches. Churches would use schools but they could do that because the schools were available to other organizations.
And so it sounded like the original question was whether the Supreme Court changed anything. So
I think it would change it, but I think that there would be an implication.
yeah. So we'll reach out to the legal team to see if that actually has. Give me a moment because one that was.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, sort of not the bulky kind of question. I didn't realize that you developed a policy about the flag, and what occurs to me, there's one flagpole there. So I assume that you can only have one flag on it at a time, I guess. And what I'm wondering is, that flagpole came about through the initiative of a pretty dedicated group of students who went through a lot and initiated a lot of conversation in this building about that issue when it was a hotter topic than it is now. Not that it's not a hot topic, but what I'm wondering is just what policy do you see, or are you advocating, or is the board considering in terms of that flagpole? So if what I'm understanding that you're saying that you and board are charged with preventing the school district from legal repercussions for denying one group or another, then does that mean that you will just take the flagpole down and not have any flags? Or if we do have flags, are we going to have flags with for a period of time? Or I mean, what is the practical application of this policy?
So the board along with the legal team and myself, we looked at two possibilities. One of them was what Dean was kind of referring to, was this idea that, hey, maybe we can put a policy in place that allows us to have people go through a process, and at the end of the process, we can say yea or nay. But the crux of the problem is we're back to square one. If we do that, the second a flag goes up, it's non-governmental. We've now established a flagpole as an open forum. So even though we went through the process, we're in the same conundrum we were in before. It doesn't solve. So the other possibility for the policy is just governmental flags thrown on the flagpoles, a state flag, United States flag.
And then that flag would.
So those are the choices, and they're not good ones.
So basically it's like, kind of a way that you're kind of forced into a position where you have to abrogate the effort that was done to install it in the first place based on this ruling by the Supreme Court.
And part of it, like I said, the question about the open forum free speech piece, that was there when the flag went up. It just hadn't been discussed a lot, but what's happened with the Supreme Court cases has brought it to the forefront.
Right. See, and the other problem that I had as you're discussing that was that, well, their free speech right is intact. They can wear their hat or an armband. But and to me, it seems like if that was to be the case, if we're going to decide that what we need to do is take that flag down in order to avoid the legal controversy that might ensue, and we're going to go ahead and say, okay, you can wear your Black Lives Matter hat in the building, shirt in the building. To me, I'm worried, yes, but I'm worried that, what I'm worried about is that if you take it, if say that comes down, and I'm not saying that there's a choice, but if that comes down and your response is, well, you still have your right to free speech, so you can wear the hat, it sort of, to me, seems like it would ignite a movement where people would say, okay, we really want to express our values, our concern about this, and start wearing that. And then in terms of free speech, we're going to have The other people, now we're in the red zone because we're angry because you took the flag down. We started wearing all the hats and stuff to exercise the free speech. Now the other side responds by wearing their hats. They're also in the red zone. And now we bring all that hatred into this building, and we have created more controversy than we're solving.
So the issue that you're bringing up, the piece of complication, and there's a solution there that's already built into Supreme Court cases that have happened. The problem that you're bringing up could be your, and that's what happens when two different sides are in the red zone. It's not about doing what's right or proper or good. It's about getting back to the government. And so that's kind of what we're talking about with the flag, right? They're coming in and they're wearing shirts that another group has opposite beliefs to. It could strike them to wear something, and then you've got problems.
But we've already went through
that's an issue of personal free speech, which the student has. The time that I could step in or an administrator could step into that, if it goes on, is if it's disruptive of the school operations or it's prophetic. So we have a little bit greater power to control things as a school in terms of free speech under those two circumstances. So again, so if the kids are coming in, they're talking trash to each other, or they're being disruptive in the classroom because they're disrupting school operations, I can tell them they're not like that.
That seems like a really slippery slope to get on.
That's what the law requires, and I have to follow. Yeah, go ahead, Keisha, go ahead.
So, I've listened to a lot of comments tonight, and I can answer some of the questions over there. The Supreme Court decision talks about public and private flags. So you could fly like an RUHS flag on that pole. But if you fly anything, like the BLM flag has been flown, and anybody can put any flag up there, or request to put it up there, and if the school board says no, they're going to get sued, and they're going to lose. So, and this is not a new issue, because when the flag first went up, I brought this up to Principal Hawks, and I got shot down. So, anybody who actually understands the First Amendment free speech and the 14th Amendment of equal protection under the law, this should be clear. Which leads to this gentleman's question on the various hats, logos, other things. And your comment about profane things. Who is the decider of what is profane? Because, let's just say, for instance, the Let's Go Brandon phraseology. There are no swears in it. Everybody knows the connotation.
Everybody knows what it intends.
Right.
The word F-U-C-K isn't offensive because of the letters that make it up.
But that word is not used in the phrase, and you're going to have children who want to walk around with that T-shirt. And you are going to be the decider of what's profane. And I'm here to tell you, if you do that, you're going to get shot down just as fast as the Supreme Court shot down 9-0 on the flag in Boston. Because you can't, it's a subjective thing. So this gentleman is right, that's a slippery slope. And I think if the board was smart, they would ban all logos of political speech in the school. And this brings me to my other issue. You started this conversation off by saying it was the community bringing hate into the school. I totally disagree with you. I think it's 180 degrees the other way. 3 to 4 years ago, this school started to bring political ideology into its teaching, which goes to the young woman from Latvia and the teacher who was talking about immigration. And you brought political ideology into the school, social learning, and basic things like these two people we're talking to are being lost. When I went to school, we were talking about the melting pot. I went to a very multicultural New Jersey, almost inner city school. And we didn't have these issues because all it was a bunch of kids. When I coach soccer in this school, all I see is a bunch of kids, a bunch of soccer players. And that's the way it needs to be done. To answer the questions over there from the teacher, the problem is...
I don't want to interrupt, I want you to finish, but I can't respond to everything that you're saying.
I know.
So if you can break it
I don't even know. I want you to to respond. I'm just trying to get a thought out here because you want to talk about difficult issues. We've kind of been tiptoeing around them tonight, so I'm bringing them to a head. So the problem is when you start to create special groups of children, you create this animosity. The kids bring it home, they tell their parents, the parents get upset because this is a country where we're all supposed to be equal. No matter what our race, no matter what our sexual orientation, no matter what our creed, no matter what our religion. I have the federal sign hanging in my office that says I can't discriminate based on any of those things. So what we need to do is not separate out certain groups of children. We need to say, we need to teach respect for everyone, for all peoples. We need to consider us all Americans. We're not Black Americans, Asian Americans, white Americans. We're just Americans. And that's where we got to get back to. And that has been lost, and especially in the last 4 years in this school system. So I think the teaching needs to change. And I could get into very specific examples of the teaching. I have read the books my kids bring home. I have seen the videos that they're shown in class. And it is, divisiveness is being taught in this school. It's wrong, and you need to stop it.
So can I respond?
Yes.
So let's go back to the free speech. Free speech is a right of these students. It's a personal right. Who decides in terms of what is profane and what is not? It's usually past precedent. And if there's a question of it, I go to the legal team and I ask, hey, this happened today. Just like we did with Lex O'Brien. Is this appropriate or does this meet the definition of profane? And I take the advice of our lawyers. So that's the first piece, and that's what would happen if the case came up in terms of the schools, in terms of the students and what they're doing. In terms of the school increasing divisiveness, I'm going to agree with you. And I'm not going to agree with you in terms of one belief being more right than the other. I'm going to agree with you with the fact that when that flag went up, what it did was it moved the oppositional group into the red zone. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Again, I'm not talking about which I believe is morally more correct or not, but I do agree that yes, it has escalated tensions here. But the examples that I gave were very specific at the beginning of the presentation. Because I see it in the parents more than I see it in the kids in my 5 years here, interacting with the kids and interacting with the parents.
It's because the kids are afraid. They don't want to speak up. Because they're afraid of the
speak up just fine because
they're afraid of the backlash.
So, John, I work in the schools all the time. I do the investigations. I have a pretty good feel of what's happening to something in the schools.
Well, you're not listening to the kids on the ground level. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Lane, I did not hear you say that the community brought hatred into the school. I heard you say that the school was a reflection of the community and there's divisiveness all over. So I never heard you put that horse before that cart. I'm going to be really clear on that. I've been in classrooms where kids have made comments about our current president, and I've had students come up to me after the class and say, you see, those of us that like the president, we got to put our heads down. We can't say that because we would get shot down. I've had students say that to me. So I'm not saying what your experience is not true. I'm sure it is. But that goes both ways. It really does. And I really don't think there's been a time where we've just been Americans. I can't imagine being a Black American and thinking, oh, we're all just Americans because everything's hunky-dory. It's just not a fact in our country. So to say we're all together in one big happy group is denying the reality that the disadvantaged groups have been going through all of this time. We have an ideal. We're not reaching it. We want to live up to it. It's written down in the Constitution, but it's not a reflection. It's never been a reflection of all Americans being equal.
I actually, as part of the reflection and trying to prepare for tonight, there were a couple of thoughts that came up that I thought was very important. Because the mistake was and always is approaching these problems by believing that the goal is to change one another's beliefs. That is false. Because this push is supposed to be able to the red zone on both sides, which is why we end up where we're at. The goal should always be finding ways to interact with one another so that we can coexist comfortably without fear or degradation. The second we start attacking each other on our beliefs or start saying my belief is better than yours, we push us both to the red zone. So the trick in having a conversation is to talk about the things that we can do to get along, work together, be together comfortably. Okay.
So I'm hearing all this talk about the flags and free speech and the Supreme Court decision, and all of that is really important. But the bottom line is that flag was put up by students because there were so many students who didn't feel safe. And if we're going to make people feel safe, I totally agree, we've got to do a lot more than a flag. I would love it if we didn't need the flag because students felt safe, that everybody knows their lives matter no matter what. And so I think where we need to go forward is in finding ways to help everybody feel safe, regardless of what they experience. When a parent or a student is saying horrible things to somebody because of their race or their gender, that isn't safe. You're talking about people being afraid to speak without knowing what they're afraid of. I don't know, but we need to make sure that they feel safe to speak too. But we have to know why they're not feeling safe.
And if we focus in on the issue of safety and what we can do together to protect everyone, regardless of beliefs, who's comfortable, we've achieved the goal we're setting.
Yeah.
If all we do is we sit down and we start having fights back and forth about who believes is right, we've lost the game. And that's been the problem. That's where everybody always focuses, and that's why things are what they are, unfortunately, at least mine. So, one or two more. I saw a whole bunch go up. Was that classes and we'll go over there. Okay.
So I've heard a lot about how wearing certain things and how it's like considered vanity or whatever. How is wearing a totally covered shirt, like it covers everything that needs to be covered, that says let's go wearing, how is that okay, but wearing, how is that not okay, but wearing like a bra as a shirt's okay to school, or wearing all the stuff that's not appropriate to wear because you're totally exposed, but having a shirt that says something that doesn't have any swears in it, that is just saying what you believe is not okay.
Because Lesto Brandon is commonly understood as Joe. That's the thing. It's the meaning that it represents, just like the symbol of the BLM flag, right? It's not profane, but some people respond to it as if it is. It's the meaning behind things that matters. In terms of dress, we do have dress codes here, and if folks are seeing things, that are, so, I'll give you a little story which I should help illustrate something. If you're seeing things that you're concerned about, report it. We've got really strong policies if we know what's going on and we follow through. Go ahead, sir.
Regardless of social issues, regardless of everybody's point of view, whatever side of the aisle you're on, what you support, what you don't support, the only thing that we need to be thinking about is educate these kids. And it needs to be an unbiased approach, which is not happening. Do you have any plans to address that? And I'm not singling out any one person or any one group, but education needs to be unbiased, and it needs to be accurate, and that's not happening here.
So you're going to have to be very specific with me, and I'd be happy to sit down and look at specific examples. But it is an expectation in the laws of the state of Vermont, as well as the regulations of the Agency of Education, that we provide an education that deals with things like equity and race. It is a requirement.
100%.
Yeah.
I agree. Everybody needs to have an understanding that we're all Americans, we're all free Americans, and everything else. But the nuts and bolts of this is they need to learn math, science, English, all the things that are going to do something for them in life. That needs to come first. All these opinions and personalities and everything else that are being injected into these kids is not only not fair to them, but it's not fair to their parents. And I would love to sit and have a chat with you about this, because I do have examples. At some point, that would be great.
Yeah, no, anytime my door is open, just all set up with me. Part of it, though, is some of the things that you might be asking, I don't know until I hear the specific concerns that you have, would be a matter of changing regs and changing laws of the legislature, which are beyond my ability to do. I have to follow them.
When educating about the government and its processes, I think that the education should be, this is how it works. There's always two sides of the story. The branches of the government discussed, what they each do, and everything else. The opinion of one side or the other needs to be left out of it. And I think that is a constant narrative on both sides. It doesn't matter what you believe. Both sides of the aisle, it is constant around here. It never used to be that way. It's very frustrating. And I don't have an idea that I can throw out right now, but we have to do something that is going to be inclusive and change that point of view to get back to the basics with these kids. You can see it in their test numbers. You can see it in job preparation. You can see it in how they are prepared to live their lives when they're grown up. And that's not all on the teachers. Parents play a big part in that too. I 100% agree. But we got to get back to doing what they need, the basics. That's what they need. And having an unbiased approach to that is just so important. Everybody, you can believe what you want, but math is math, science is science. Social issues should be left to the side during the education process. It has caused hate in the school, it has caused divisiveness. I 100% agree. I went to school here. I've been a firefighter in this town for 22 years. I've seen all kinds of things through this place, and it has never been this bad. And there's a whole nother generation that is coming into some real problems that we need to head off. And that's going to take people from both sides of every argument. We need to get together and get them back on the right track. Because it gets worse every day, Mr. Miller. Every day.
Like I said, part of the reason for coming together is to start to have these discussions. And if you've got specific things to sit down and show that we can take a look at what happens.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So seriously, Daniel, we'll take it out. Other questions that folks may have?
I have a stepson that is about to enter into this school, and I haven't been to any of these meetings or into any of the school board meetings. I came tonight because my husband received these emails saying that these forms are happening. So I came because I'm deeply concerned of my impressionable child entering this school and its focus not being on education of the things that are going to make them successful in life, like this gentleman just talked about. If you're finding that the divisiveness that has happened over the last few years is rooted in these students being able to express their beliefs in certain ways, and trust me, I am all for freedom of speech in every way. But I'm also believe in school policy, and I work at the hospital. There's every race, religion, creed, different people from different countries that work at the hospital, and we all get along, we all have different beliefs, but we keep our political beliefs aside, our religious beliefs aside. We come together as a group to focus on our patients. That's what we do. I feel like the school system needs to do that same thing. Spend less time focusing on the social justice things and making sure that you can express your political beliefs by wearing your different hats and shirts and flying your flags. If you're finding that that is the root of the problem, eliminate that as the problem. I want kids to be able to express themselves, but not at the detriment of their education. They're in an extremely vulnerable time in their life with emotions and hormones and figuring out who they are. They have no idea who they are at this age. They're still trying to put it all together. And if we're not giving them the tools they need to succeed in life now, I don't know what they're going to turn into later in life. So if you're finding that the divisiveness is from flying the BLM flag or wearing your MAGA hat, why isn't there a school policy that just squashes it? We're not going to fly any flag other than the United States flag and the state flag. We're not going to put a MAGA hat on. You can't come to school in a bra. You can't come to school with a skirt that's showing off your lady bits. You can't come to school in an apron. You can't do any of those things. Have policies that make sense, that protect our kids, but focus on the education and preparing them for life to come. Because right now, they're not prepared. They're afraid. They're at each other's throats, and that's not how I was raised up. That wasn't school. I mean, I'm not that old. I wasn't in school that long ago. It wasn't like that. We didn't have this. I didn't know my teacher's political beliefs. I kind of had an idea about some of my classmates, but we didn't really talk about it in a way that would, take away from our education. I'm concerned that the focus is off of where it needs to be, and as a community, we can come together. It's proven. It's just down the road. At Gifford, we come together, we do our job, we take care of our patients. At school, they should have come to school, learn, play sports together, do after-school curricular activities, and be as one. I just don't understand why we let it get this far out of hand if you understand what the root cause is. Like, it's obvious. It's not I don't know what I got.
No, it's actually, you're very, very close, and appreciate that. Like I said, a lot of the coming together and discussions that we have, I think, are going to be important. I think that the one thing that we don't want to leave out, though, is the idea that we do have students of color. We do have LGBTQ students. And I don't think that most of the folks that have spoken, and I may be wrong, you can correct me if I am, most of the folks that have spoken in the last 10 to 15 minutes have students that fit any of those categories and understand what they meant. And so I'm not saying that should give them more rights than all other students, but I'm saying that we have this discussion, it has to be taken into consideration too, because their experience is dramatically different in so many ways than even my kids. I've got middle-class white kids that went through this district as well. I still have one here. Their experience is much different than the students of color and LGBTQ. And so until we have that discussion and hear from them and hear what they've been through and what's important to them, only then can we try to meld things together in terms of what we're talking about.
Can I add something that might add some insight from the classroom level? Just that part of our professional development in the past couple of years has been to become a trauma-informed school. And as part of that work, a new understanding that we have is that around about 50% of our job is to educate your kids by giving them information and tools and the traditional things you'd associate with the school. The other half is teaching them how to be human beings, is teaching them how to handle civil discourse. If we squash all conversation of that nature until senior year, they are going to enter society having no idea how to have a civil discussion about things that are highly contentious. Of course, we're going to be neutral mediators. I teach 5th and 6th grade. My kids should not have any idea of my political affiliations, leanings, opinions. But can I mediate a discussion between a group of students who have a really strong political belief from whatever the source may be, whether it's something they've read or their parents influenced, and then a group that has another completely opposite belief? I should be able to help them navigate those discussions. And I'm not going to tell them which one's right and which one's wrong. It's not my job. But what my job is to make sure they can have that discussion in a respectful manner so they don't enter society with absolutely no idea how to do that, and then just increasing that divisiveness. So if we don't acknowledge that our kids have opinions, and their opinions are influenced by us, and we need to show them how to discuss those opinions, then yeah, it's going to be divisive. And I can see how that looks like we're teaching political subjects in school. We're not. We're navigating with your kids as best we can.
And I think that's an important piece, and we've got two more figures now, so give me just a moment. Important piece of all of this is just that, it was mentioned earlier this morning, But one of the greatest things is we can get through this COVID stuff and get people back kind of involved. It might be good for people to have concerns to go in where it's possible and see the classrooms and see how things are actually taught, as opposed to making opinions based upon, and your opinions may be right, but opinions based upon what you're hearing as opposed to what you're seeing. And so, that's definitely something that we can do, because that would help, right? You always want to start from where you're at, understanding where you're at, and that might be conducive. So go ahead.
I just want to share a personal story. I grew up a long time ago, and I went to school in a different community, but it was as racially homogenous as Vermont. And I did not get an unbiased education in terms of history. The history I was taught went over, neglected many, many, many truths about our past, my personal heritage, and I agree with those who have said we need to be unbiased in our presentation. But I would hope that things like our history and understanding our culture and understanding America, that those are complete, and that we learn about the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, and so that we can discern whether or not we have reached the goal that we all strive to make. Without good information, we're bound to have more of the kinds of conversations that are not helpful that we have been having. So that's been my personal experience, and what was reported to me by my daughter. I'm part Native American. That history has not been told accurate. Thank you.
So I'd like to go back to your comment about your classroom and how you direct conversation. And to me, what you described would be called education. Because what you're allowing is you're allowing one side to voice their side, allowing the other side to voice their side, and you're guiding the conversation for each side to have a better understanding of what their beliefs are about. In this world, to me, this world should never be about black and white, okay? I've said this to politicians across this country when I talk to them, that when you go to DC or when you go to whatever, and if you're only going there to fight for your party, you're doing the people of this country an unjust thing. The world should be more about the gray. There are many more shades of gray than there is just white and black. And if everybody would open up their minds and be willing to concede a little bit in their beliefs, you would find that we would find many more shades of gray that allow us to have common ground, a balance that allows our kids to come into a public school and feel comfortable in the education they're getting. There's a lot of issues. I agree with a lot of what you said. I have spent many times in some of the forums talking about not necessarily my opinion, and I stated this in many of the times I spoke, but it was the opinions of children, kids, young adults that have been in this building that feel like they haven't been allowed to speak. When they do, they have to deal with some kind of overpowerment from the teachers in the room, whether it's based on how they're graded, whether it's based in class discussions and how they're treated in those discussions. when a teacher takes a discussion and asks the room to separate to sides, and there's only one kid on one side, the rest of the room's on the other side with the teacher, and all they're doing is pounding information on that one kid, trying to get them to come to the other side. That's not education. Okay, that's over-empowerment, and it's what some people call indoctrination. It's only showing one side. And when teachers in the classrooms of this school, math, English, science, history, doesn't matter the curriculum, somehow it gets turned political. And I had my daughter come home crying from school almost every single day because she says it's the same thing in every class and it never goes away. It's only one side. When you go to a different school and they have these discussions about political issues, you know what they do at some schools? They bring kids out of the stands, put them in chairs, and someone guides the conversation so that the students are allowed to voice their opinions and give their beliefs and the reasons why they have those beliefs. And they do exactly what you just said. They guide that conversation without letting the students know their opinion or what side they're on, which is very helpful, and allows the students to become more trustful of that individual that's allowing them to have that moment of discussion that doesn't turn red. And to me, that's one thing that I've asked for since day one, and have gotten no help with that issue whatsoever. I've had a son who's the greatest thing about being here for him is he can't wait to get out of here. Okay, and I've coached a number of students that have come up through feeling that same way. And to me, when you're trying to generate an energy and a spirit in a community, it does begin with the parents setting the example of how it should be. But it also comes to the people inside this building. And if you want a true representation of community, both places have to have the same spirit and the same energy. And that's what needs to start happening. And until you get that same rhythm, that same heartbeat, and everybody knows what the ending goal is to the journey, you're never going to have it. You're never going to have it. And so people have to concede on the extremes, somehow, some way, to get to that gray and find many shades that everybody can enjoy.
I have my back to you, so if anybody on this side after this wants to respond, please let me know. I apologize.
Hi. I just want to say thanks, John, for our conversation on the side of the soccer field yesterday. We still have a lot to discuss about state rights versus federal rights, so we'll continue that conversation. I don't know if we will find common ground or not, so thank you. Lane, you talk about the equity coordinator coming on board, and as in education, we are given a job, and then there's other duties as assigned. And so my concern with the equity coordinator at this point is it's a big job with a lot of things to take care of. And my hope is, and this is nothing for you to fix or respond to right now, but my hope is that we as a community will have the opportunity to understand what the goals and objectives are and how we will infuse those action steps from those goals and objectives into, for example, what can we as a community member on the sidelines of the soccer field, if we hear racial slurs happening, what's actively can we do to shut that down, support the athletes? You know, so we have that training and come moving forward. Okay, that's all.
No, it's good. You know, the equity coordinator, again, this is to be straight up and blunt. One of the reasons for that equity coordinating position is because we have a very talented group of people that were working on social justice. The concern was they were pushing too hard too fast. And so one of the purposes of the equity coordinator is to work with that group to say, hey, this is spot on for where we need to go in terms of trying to make things progress for the district. This is too extreme, needs to be dialed back, or this isn't pushing things fast enough. And so to have that mediator, that person kind of overseeing the work that is happening, the really good work that folks are engaged in, but just making sure it's keeping people in the green zone and maybe a little in the yellow as they do the work, keeping them out of the because it is. I mean, the folks that are doing the work in the schools, it goes both ways. One of the reasons they started pushing harder was because they were seeing more incidents of racism and violence and misogyny within the schools. So they pushed hard, but it pushed into the red zone. And the people on the other side pushed back and pushed them into the red zone. And so we end up where we're here having this conversation tonight. And it's a good conversation, and I appreciate it. But it's a beginning. We've got a long ways to go. But my hope is that folks will be there with me as we're changing things up and getting geared up for quite a few things. The other reason for bringing on an assistant superintendent next year is because whether you realized it or not, you hired one of the best curriculum people in probably the eastern half of the United States. I had not been able to do that work. And so one of the reasons to bring that person on was so that we could reinvest in the academics starting next year, so I'm freed up to actually do that one instead of the operational pieces that I do on all the different research. So we're at a turning point, and it's a good time as long as COVID doesn't turn its head back on us for us to be able to move forward in a really positive way. Yeah.
Will you be having these forums or discussions on a regular basis?
Monthly.
Okay.
Yeah, and if it needs to be more than that, I'm happy to do that. That was what I did when I came in. It wasn't as focused as it is now, because I had some time to kind of feel out the district and see what seems to be working, what doesn't, what people's concerns are. Was a little bit difficult during COVID. But yeah, it's monthly. And you know, we're going to put some programming in place to really try to get people connected. And some of the ideas tonight, all the conversation was great, but some of the ideas tonight were exactly what we needed. So I appreciate that a lot. I thank you. In about a week and a half, I'll send out for what our next meeting is. So I appreciate that. And thank you very much for coming. Please be safe, because I think it's warm enough down the streets and out there, but you never know because it's Vermont.